Welcome to the LCCC Library, Focus on Faculty Series, and Games in Education. That's why we're here today. So how can games and simulations be experimental, educational, and therapeutic? Please pay attention. So this is one of Mike's innovations, and Mike Substelny is a very creative, multifaceted individual. He is a member of the distance learning design team and is an assistant professor teaching several computer game simulation and design courses. And most importantly, he has been a pivotal force in the CGSD program. So please welcome Mike Substelny.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm very glad you could come. I hope you help yourselves to some of the candy they've made available here to the audience. That way, when some of you start falling asleep, I'll believe it is a sugar coma and that I am not actually boring. So let's get rolling in talking about today's topic of games in education, and that's just the tip of the iceberg I'm going to be really hitting today. What you're going to get today is a very concentrated distillation of all my favorite lectures of all the classes that I teach that has some stuff that I hope you find useful in your daily lives. And those of you who are my students who have taken the intro class and the serious games class, you'll be familiar with about 90% of this, but there is even some extra material that only you are going to get today. So let's talk about part one of my lecture, What Do We Know About Fun? And that's a topic we cover in the Intro to Games class quite a bit. It's about what half of the class is about, figuring out what is and is not fun. And we have this gentleman, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, to thank for a lot that we know about fun. He was a Hungarian-American psychologist, and he specialized in happiness. Can you imagine a better job than that? He studied the activities that humans consider to be fun, and he wanted to figure out what their characteristics were. So what he did is ask hundreds of people about the activities that they enjoy, not just games, but any enjoyable activity. And he found a pattern to those activities. And some of the things he discovered were that regardless of age or gender or any other factors, human beings said the same things about what they enjoyed. He found out that enjoyable tasks must offer you the opportunity to complete them. You get much less satisfaction from an activity that cannot be completed. And they must also give you a chance to concentrate on them. Things that are just passive and casual don't give you the same pleasure amount as something that you can concentrate on. Also, he found that you must have clear goals given to you when you're doing an enjoyable task. And that kind of goes along with the opportunity to complete the task. And that you must get immediate feedback. And that is one of the challenges we have in education to giving people an enjoyable experience. Enjoyable task, oh, there's an interesting picture. That's an enjoyable task. I am building a model battleship in that picture. I think it's the Bismarck. You must be able to enter it easily to escape your everyday life. And that's a task I can very easily enter. I just sit down with my little model kit and my hobby knife and my glue and my paint, and I'm making a battleship. Enjoyable tasks must provide a sense of control. And Ron may be recognizing some of the photographs that are in my presentation that I swiped from the website as our public available photographs. You must have a sense of control of the activity. If the activity doesn't give you control, if you are totally under something else's control, you experience less fun, he discovered. And the enjoyable task must offer you this temporary loss of self. You've got to kind of get to become more than you are ordinarily when you're enjoying yourself. And it must alter the sense of time. When you're experiencing your enjoyable activity, your sense of time should be very different from what it is normally. And the more different it is, probably the more enjoyment you're having. And we get into that a little bit more in my classes. So, Csikszentmihalyi developed this really cool theory called the theory of flow. And when those of you who are going to go into the games industry, this is very important to you, the theory of flow. And the flow is a state of concentration so focused that it amounts into absolute absorption. And he studied where that takes place, especially in games. And he found out that if you graph on an X and Y axis the ability of a player as they start playing around with the game and learning how it works and get better and better, and how difficult the game is as it gets more and more challenging on X and Y axis, that you can have a player here starting out with a brand new game at its easiest point with no knowledge of how to play that game. And if it gets too challenging too fast, the player will become frustrated. And if the player starts off at no ability and no knowledge and the game stays too easy, the player will become bored. But if you start off with a brand new player and that player stays kind of in between those two, you keep them in the state he called the state of flow. And this is a diagram used in our textbook where you're between frustration and boredom. You're right keeping your player in that sweet spot where they will never experience anything but pleasure from playing your game or whatever other activity you might be challenging them with. We study games in my classes. So the state of flow, it turns out, is not enough. And to talk about that, we're going to reference a game I dislike and a game I like. This game gave me no fun at all. Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the Vivendi game that was for the PlayStation 2, I found to be quite boring, even though it's based on an extremely exciting story. That was based on the book, not on the movie. And this is Grand Theft Auto 4, a game that is enormously fun. We'll get into some of that in a minute. In Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo starts out in his home, Bag End in the Shire, looking for things in his home. He doesn't know where things are in his own home. He has to search his home to find some of his own property, wandering around. And then he has to help all the other hobbits that live in the Shire with their tasks of their everyday life for like hours and hours and hours, it seemed like. Frodo has this thing on the screen called a purity meter. All right? And that becomes important in the plot of the game. If you know the story of the Lord of the Rings, the thing about Frodo is he can bear the ring because he is so pure. And if he uses the ring, it corrupts him. And the more he uses it, the more danger there is that he will become corrupt and evil. But if he keeps his purity level up nice and high, he can bear the ring. And so he starts off the game building up his purity level by doing all these good deeds for all his friends, the other hobbits in the Shire. Now, the good deeds are little puzzles. They're not especially easy to do to recharge his purity as he's helping his friends. They challenge the player quite a bit. But there's no risk at all. When you're helping the miller find the pin to operate his mill, you're not going to get hurt. You're not going to have to hide. You're not going to have to fight anything. You're just running around the Shire doing good deeds for hours and hours and hours. Now compare that to Grand Theft Auto 4. Believe it or not, this guy, Nico Bellic, he also has a purity meter. All right? He has, in this game, his wanted level indicator up in the corner of the screen. And the more bad he is, the higher his wanted level is throughout the game. Very, very much like Frodo's purity meter. And they do exactly the same thing pretty much in the game. If Frodo's purity level gets too low or Nico's wanted level gets too high, the game's going to end really fast. in this case, the cops are going to come and close in on you, and your game is pretty much over. In Lord of the Rings, there's all kinds of horrible things that could happen to you depending on where you are when you finally get corrupted and you are not pure enough anymore. So they have this very important common game mechanic, but these two games don't feel the same at all. The difference is, from the very beginning in Grand Theft Auto 4, Niko Bellic faces danger. Niko Bellic can go out and get himself beat up or killed at the very beginning of the game. In Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo, even though he's challenging me to run around and find all these things and do these good deeds, there's just no danger. There's no risk like Niko experiences. And it turns out if you're risking something, then you're more engaged. And so, just to caution you, risk doesn't have to be violent. I did happen to use a violent example with Grand Theft Auto 4. But there are plenty of game examples, like when I play Scrabble here, and I might be setting up my opponent for a great move, or by the words I play, or the letters I play, or I might be using up letters that I really will need next time. I am risking with every move I make in Scrabble, and that adds to the thrill of it. Or as you make your moves in Bejeweled Blitz here, or any of the candy-crushing, bejewel-smashing games that are out there, there's a constant sense of pressure and risk in every move you make. You may ruin your setup for a great move that you hadn't noticed. Or, I got to say, Plants vs. Zombies can be conceived of as slightly violent, but as these pieces of fictitious vegetation go to battle against these fictitious zombies, there's definitely a sense of risk that you could lose the game at any time if you place your plants unjudiciously, let's say. So risk, turns out, is important, and danger is exciting. Now, everyday life is challenging and can be dangerous. We all know in all the things that you do in your daily life, or some people more than others. But everyday tasks do not always offer those things that we find to be fun. Chance to complete them, chance to concentrate, the clear goals, the immediate feedback, the escape from everyday life, sense of control, temporary loss of self, and the altered sense of time. And so when the games are built around that, when they give you that tension, that risk, and many other factors that we talk about in my classes, you will experience a state of fun. And I've got these pictures to go along with the clear goals, immediate feedback, and the sense of control, and the loss of self, and the altered sense of time. Now we're going to talk about Johann Huizinga. He was a Dutch historian, and we won't talk about him for very long. He wrote Homo Ludens, the study of the play elements in culture. It was not written in English, and everything I'm talking about will be a translation. He wrote this at a time in 1938 when Homo sapiens was a really cool term that people were throwing around a lot. And recently someone had termed Homo faber, man the maker. So man the reasoner, man the maker. He wanted to jump on that fame bandwagon to be a part of the culture, and he coined the term Homo ludens, man the player, because he thought playing was so important to human culture, and he set out to study that. So when he wrote his book, he considered it a history book and not a science book. And he explored the question, and this is how it is translated in the book: how far does culture itself bear the aspects of play? And he took it quite far when he described gameplay and coined this term play theory, and described the conceptual space in which play occurs. To him, the conceptual space was, for example, here, this fictitious front yard is conceptually where this game is taking place, or this chess battlefield is conceptually where this game is taking place. Or in the case of Star Wars Battlefront 2 taking place in that cave, or a game my students make in their first day of class this evil clutches also takes place in the cave. These are not real caves. Believe it or not, they are just a part of the game, but in the mind of the player, they are real, and that is the conceptual space as he thought of it. The actual space in which the game takes place may be completely different. And so he came up with this idea of the magic circle. To him, the magic circle is what separated the actual space from the conceptual space. So when we, in the gaming biz, talk about the magic circle, we talk about entering, crossing this threshold from the actual world you're in into the conceptual space in which the game takes place. And it turns out players will do things and risk things inside the magic circle that they would never do outside the magic circle. For example, here we have our old friend in Grand Theft Auto 4 is carjacking right now. Nico Bellic is carjacking that car. Or here we've got a board game where evil Cylon robots are out to exterminate the human race. And that's not something you would normally do in your everyday life. But inside the magic circle, humans are perfectly willing to try that out. And now there are other forms of entertainment, of course, that cross the borders of culture, violence, sex, and other taboos. For example, movies may include sex, books may include violence, movies may include sex, any James Bond, and of course music can do all kinds of taboo things in our culture. So what makes games so special? Why do they affect people so much? Well, turns out that in none of those except for games do the players get to experience courage and make those risky decisions. There we are back to that risk again as being so engaging for our minds. And so how do we get people to enter the magic circle? Well, he said that we had to do something he called accepting the invitation to play. All right, and here's a picture of me playing laser tag. They make those guns look really, really cool. They could have made them look dull and boring, but they put the invitation to play in the shape of the gun. If you've ever seen a pinball machine with bright flashing lights and music playing, or other types of games with really cool looking controllers, and we're about to get to that in a moment, you've experienced the invitation to play. I'm going to show you right here what Susan was demonstrating at the beginning of class, or showing off. This play attention helmet is for playing computer games with your brain waves. Without using your hands at all, just using your brain waves, you can play a computer game using this helmet. Now, is that not an awesome invitation to play? Everybody out there is looking at this thing saying, I want to try that. And if anybody wants to try it, you can at the end. I'll demonstrate it at the end of my presentation and show you how to do it. But you may find that the invitation is a lot more alluring than the game itself, because concentrating those brain waves is really hard work. Okay, moving on. We now move on to part 2 of my presentation. The gain for brains comes mainly from the games, where we get into taking this fun and putting it into education. All right, we'll start off asking the question, how do brains learn information, as you all get terrified by my throbbing brain up on the screen? Back in 1969, Dr. Edgar Dale came up with this idea of the cone of experience. I am not going to debate how people feel about Dale's work right now, but a lot of our institutions in this country were built around his work for decades. And you'll probably recognize some of the stuff that Dr. Dale has here. He thought people could learn a little bit from reading and remember it. And he thought maybe you generally remember 10% of the learning you get from reading. Maybe 20% of the learning you get from hearing. And maybe 30% for still pictures, and we'll go on. Then moving pictures, you'd remember more. A static exhibit like a museum. I'm showing the USS Cod submarine in Cleveland right now. You might learn more. A demonstration of something, you might retain even more from that. A hands-on workshop where you got to actually try that something you might retain even more. Getting into a role play situation, he thought you would retain even more. Getting into the simulated experience of actually trying to do the thing you're trying to learn, he thought you would retain even more. And then having the real experience, he believed you would retain the most. And he was encouraging American institutions in 1969 to try and get away from this and push a little further down that pyramid in what we did. And he believed people remember 90% of what they get out of a real experience. And his work was used for quite a while and is still cited pretty frequently. So with this cone of experience, he was, in 1969, pushing to get our educational institutions down to here. Maybe we could get some still pictures and moving pictures into the classroom with slideshows and movies and things like that. And so a lot of money was spent making film strips and films to be shown to students in the 70s and going into the 80s. And he wanted it to go a little further, but it was expensive to make this conversion from nothing but reading to the exhibits and the film strips and the movies and audio and things like that that he wanted introduced into the classroom. But we spent a lot of money on that. Now, fast forward to the 21st century. Well, not fast forwarding yet. Moving down to here, to the simulated experience in 1969, it took NASA to do that. It took millions of dollars to create some types of simulations that were used. And that turned out to be something that was very effective in training our astronauts, though. And the military had been using those for a long time, and it was expensive, and that's really my point here. There were simulations being used, but not very much in the classroom at the time. Well, today we've got microcomputers. Today, for not much money, boom, we can move right down to here to simulate many learning experiences. And the cost is so much lower than it was to bring movies into the classroom right now as we're harnessing that. And some of you are, I believe, harnessing that with simulations made by book publishers and things that you're using in your classes. And there's room for, I believe, so much more. Where he believed you retained 90% of what you learned. All right. So we're talking now about, I've got a class, Serious Games and Simulations, here at Lorain County Community College that I teach, where we try to get students the skills they need to understand curriculum a little bit and develop serious games and simulations. We have here a picture of and the idea being ways to give students some of these experiences that will cause them to retain as well as be engaged by the learning experience. This is an example of Immune Attack. It's a simulation game that you can get for free to teach you about the immune system. And you get to pilot a little microscopic submarine around inside someone's immune system and have various adventures trying to cure diseases inside their body. And this is Econ 201. And I'm going to show you on the screen the trailer for Econ 201. I still got that up on. Oops, come on.
On the edge of the universe, a tiny speck of light catches the attention of a Sarbonian colony ship. Another world to exploit, to drain of its resources, to plunder. But then, the unexpected happens. And now, the economics of survival is all that matters.
I see. With the Primus dead, that makes you the highest-ranking survivor. You're in command.
That's all well and fine, but we have a limited supply of tablets. If we are to rely on them for saline, we need to allocate them carefully.
From analyzing our production data, I estimate that we're more than capable of creating a surplus. If we build up an inventory that can support us in the absence of labourers, then we can justify the opportunity cost.
You play that game at UC Greensboro and get college credit for playing that game. Every week you have a different adventure and learn an economics lesson. You take quizzes and tests. At the end, you take the same final exam as all the students that are going into a regular classroom and getting lectured by a professor. And they've had this class going for 8 or 10 years now. I'd love to see the success rate data they've got for it. They were pretty proud of it when they made it. It is an entire course, an entire full credit course in microeconomics. And that is a very exciting thing to me. I think there are possibilities for other courses to be developed that are nothing but a game that teaches you something. I know when I was playing just DOS-based games, I learned something about economics back in the 1980s. Sorry, okay, we were here talking about that. All right, serious games. We're getting near the end of the things I wanted to tell you. The purpose of a serious game is to be educational or experimental. So it could be, you could learn something from it, learn a lesson from it, or you could discover something by using a serious game or simulation. You do have control over the outcome if you're the learner or the experimenter. You don't get that so much with a textbook. You don't get that at all with a textbook. You don't control the outcome. Oh, here's a serious game we use here at Lorain County Community College. Doug Reichart developed this for our chemistry classes. This is Ion Field, which is an alignment type game like a Tetris or a Bejeweled type of game where you line up these atoms so that their ion fields obey the octet rule to make compounds, and the more fancy combinations of compounds earn you more points. And you play this game and play this game and play this game, and you learn the octet rule in our chemistry classes here. And I hope they're still getting great use out of that game. It's very cool. And the reason we created our serious games and simulations class in our degree program is because this is something that a student could develop at the associate's degree level. So we are trying to create a population of people who could develop games like this for our institution and for others. And so if any of you professors has an idea for some nice little simulation to teach a little lesson like the octet rule, let me know. My students are always looking for term projects. So in the case of this game, the outcome is to learn the rules. The outcome isn't to, well, the outcome is not some kind of victory over bad guys or something like that. If you learn the rules, you have gotten good at the game. All right, let's talk about serious games. You probably hear a lot that, oh, the games industry is making more money than the music industry. The games industry is making more money than film industry or the book industry. Well, those numbers come out all the time, and these days the games industry may be making more than any two of those put together. But I'm not going to talk about the games industry compared to other industries except for itself. In this graph here, I am showing the latest data I was able to find that was comparable. 2007, the entertainment games industry that everybody touts as being so enormous, $9.5 billion in this country, was beaten out by the serious games industry. So if you learn the skills to make an entertainment game, consider you might find a more lucrative career making a serious game, where they made another $1 billion, 10.5 as opposed to 9.5 back in the year 2007. And I have cited the places where I found those numbers there if you want to discuss them afterwards. So it's quite a lucrative thing between medical simulations and military simulations and academic simulations like we use here serious games and simulations is big business. And then there are the games that blur the line. All of these games, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, Lips is a very popular new one, where you sing into a microphone and it gives you a score. You can actually learn to carry a tune playing that game. You can learn something about music. You can learn some marine biology playing Endless Ocean here, even though they're entertainment games. All of these games got counted under the entertainment bar I was just showing, even though you learn something from these games. And if you want to learn to sing, some of these games where you use an actual microphone and it checks the frequency of your notes, they could actually help make you quite a good singer. All right, and moving on, nearing the end now, or we're at the end now. Oh, other serious games and simulations. That's right, then there's more. Industrial simulations are a big market. If you've got the skills to make a simulation of I don't know, zombies attacking your front porch, you probably also have the skills to make a simulation of the octet rule, of atoms being moved around. You could probably also do a simulation of a factory floor plan where you determine how material may be flowing through there, where the production bottlenecks are, and things like that. Takes a little more statistics to do an industrial simulation, probably a master's level degree to get good at this operations research stuff, but it is the same sort of thing, and it is a big market, and you can make a career out of industrial simulations. Scientific simulations, also exploring astrophysics and subatomic particles and things like that, is done using computer simulations, and somebody's got to be writing those simulations. Military simulations. One of my professors who taught me this stuff, his career before he was a professor was writing military simulations deep down in an underground secure vault where he would determine back in the 80s what the outcome of different scenarios might be of the Soviet tanks crossing over into West Germany or something like that. There was big business in writing military simulations back then, and I bet there still is now. All right, there are also serious games used in therapy. You can make self-improvement. You can make a patient's life improved by therapy that they can get from a simulation, and that is how we're going to end today. There are simulations that help amputees and ADHD patients. And that is what I'm going to demonstrate here with the helmet. We're going to switch now to the software for play attention. And I'm going to move over here for just a moment. There are sensors on this helmet to detect brain waves, and they need this little bit of this electrolytic fluid on there to help them conduct the brain waves. I'm going to strap on this helmet. And I'm going to undergo a therapy treatment for attention deficit disorder. The idea being that coming from studies done by I believe it was the US Navy, that the ratio of high-frequency brain waves to low-frequency brain waves indicates your state of concentration. And this is measuring those brain waves and calculating what that ratio is. And when you're in a deep state of concentration in one of these games, you'll experience success. When the ratio is bad and you're in a poor state of concentration, you will not experience success. You will just languish about, as I'm about to show you. Let's try the discriminatory processing game on beginner level. All right, and assuming it's all hooked up correctly, here we go. I probably won't talk very much while I'm playing this because it will be hard to concentrate. But I will talk a little bit to explain what's going on. I'm about to be flying in a spaceship that will have asteroids coming at me. In order to keep my spaceship flying, I need to be in a state of high concentration. If my state lapses, it will tell me I need to concentrate more to refuel my spaceship. Meanwhile, these asteroids will be coming at me. And I have to process discriminatorily which ones I want to allow to hit me and which ones I don't. I have to repel the white asteroids and absorb the red asteroids. Got it? And that's maybe not instinctive, but that's how I have to process it while the game is playing, assuming it works. Here we go. Looks good. All right, concentrate. The red bar shows my state of concentration. I want to absorb the red asteroid. I will press a key to repel the white asteroid. Oh, I was too late, and I lost my focus. Oh, I was really on a run there. Game's half over. Seconds. And the game's over. And now my therapist would make notes of whether I twisted my hair, bit my nails, whether I fidgeted, hummed, called out, did I cry, any outbursts, did I need the instructions repeated? Did I tip over the desk or chair or anything like that? Was I burping or chatting to myself, anything like that? I will rate myself as having done none of those things.
So someone's observing you while you play that game? And
Yes. Yes. This is intended to be therapy for attention deficit disorder. It does not diagnose attention deficit disorder. You have to be diagnosed first. So you could play this game and not do very well, and that doesn't mean you have attention deficit disorder. You may have very, very great capability of controlling your high frequency brain waves. It just hasn't adjusted to how your brain waves are yet. But the idea is by giving you this biofeedback, it gives the patient the skills to turn on the high levels of concentration when they need to in their lives. I'm not advocating that this necessarily works. That's the manufacturer's job to say that this is an effective therapy tool. I'm saying these are serious games that are making the person who wrote them money. And they're a great career, and it's a really interesting application of serious games. And everybody who takes my serious games class gets to experience this entire set of games. There, as you saw, if I go back to home, there are all these different games that come with this that use the brainwaves to control them. And all of my students critique these games and try and figure out how they could have been made better. But now, if anyone wants to try this game, you are welcome to give it a whirl if you want to. Otherwise, if anyone has any questions for me right now, I'll open up the floor. And if anybody wants to take my classes, please do. Yes, Rita.
My question is, what are the controllers like for the game that you were just demonstrating? Is it a hand control or?
For the game I was just showing, the discriminatory processing with the asteroids coming at me, the only controls were the helmet and the space bar. All right. There are other games here that don't even use the space bar. Most of the games here, all the games here use the helmet. But there are 2 of them that just use the helmet, where all you do is concentrate on them. No, there are 3 of them where all you do is concentrate. This one, attention stamina, I'll demonstrate that for just a few seconds. And you'll see, this is a look ma, no hands game. The controls are nothing but my brain waves. It's just a little bit less interesting. This is my favorite, actually. I'm going to play the orca. All right. And as I concentrate, the orca dives. Lost my concentration. If I can get the orca down low enough, the orca will begin to collect treasure. And see, no hands. That's all I'm going to show you. This game, yes, I want to quit that. So the visual tracking game, you use the mouse. The short-term memory game is Simon. Basically, you use the arrow keys for the 4 colored things on Simon. The time on task is just concentrating until you finish a project. You're unloading a truck, or you're loading a truck. And the academic bridge is you just put this game on while you're studying. And at the end of your study session, you'll be able to look and see how the game did and see how well you were concentrating during your study session. This one, the academic bridge can go on for a very long time if you want it to. The time on task can also go on for a very long time because it doesn't end until you've spent enough time with a high ratio of high-frequency brain waves to low-frequency brain waves to finish the task. So that one usually is over in maybe 6 minutes. But can be a lot longer if you don't concentrate at all. That was a good question. Anyone else have a question? Anything? Yeah.
Do you think that Lord of the Rings game would be any fun if they skipped the first part and just went to the journey where it's actually at risk?
Well, yes. The running around the Shire, building up your goodness level is pretty boring for somebody who's expecting a good, rousing Tolkien adventure. But there are other things. In one of my lectures, I contrast that game with the Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga. Anybody ever played Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga? In that game, it's very similar. You have to run around and play out the plot of a movie, or in this case, 6 movies in the Complete Saga. But during Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga, while you're acting out this entire movie, there are these Legos laying around on the ground. And you run around and you pick them up. So when you're going from place to place, you can pick up some Legos. When you're going to fight some bad guys, or when you slay a bad guy with your lightsaber, a bunch of Legos pops out of them, and you can collect those Legos and build things. And by adding, that wasn't in the movie at all. But by adding that little extra challenge, you keep the player engaged constantly. If they had had something like that, if during the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, while I'm running around the Shire doing these good deeds, I could have been picking up little Legos to build something, or treasure of some kind. If I could have been learning or accumulating something, just having some kind of sub-goal in there, it would have made the game a lot more engaging. They didn't go with that because that game was based on the Tolkien books, and that particular, the Vivendi game, was very faithful to the Tolkien books. And there are a lot of Tolkien fans who've spent their lives fantasizing about being a hobbit and growing up in the Shire, and for them the beginning of that game is heaven. They love that part. But most gamers who are looking for an adventure don't so much love it. Yes, Dr. McKinley.
Yes, I just wanted to compliment you on your presentation because the last game I played was Frogger.
Last time, yeah, Frogger was the last game Dr. McKinley played.
So I very much enjoyed your presentation.
I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Because if the questions are all over, all right, Rita, yeah.
You have talked about how Lorraine County might be a future site for the gaming industry or the development of the gaming industry.
There is no reason that the gaming industry can't be in Lorain County. It doesn't take anything more than some computer hardware, some computer software, and some smart people to make a gaming industry. And you can have computers, hardware, and software anywhere. There's no barrier to that, at least not in this country. All we need to do is have smart people. And that's the business we're in, isn't it, as a college? So we just need to make game developers, and we can have an industry here. And we have some nice incubation facilities here at Lorain County Community College. We have our Blackstone launch pad for our students, and we also have our Entrepreneur Innovation Center that has grants and things like that. So I foresee a future when we will have a gaming industry right here in Lorain County, and it'll be because of Lorain County Community College. Other questions? Yes, Terry.
How long have you been doing this as far as the gaming?
How long have I been teaching these classes? Yes. Wow, I think it's about 10 years now.
Now, have you had any students from those classes pursue the gaming?
Well, yes. Yes, I've had, but at least one student who went on to further his education at Shawnee State University, another that went on to Full Sail University and just graduated, and I've got several that have gotten jobs in various computer-related fields. None of them, and several are developing games, but none of them has their day job as a game creator yet, as far as I know. But they're out there making games, some of them, and some of them are making money making the games. As indie developers. But we'll keep you posted on that. The game industry is small here in Lorain County, but it does exist. And there's nothing stopping it from growing here. Other questions? Okay. Who wants to try on the brainwave helmet? Usually I have a few takers for this invitation. Nobody? Okay, maybe when the camera's not rolling anymore, someone will want to try on the brainwave helmet. Well, thank you, everyone.